Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Somebody has found closed captions as well. Fantastic. If you are looking to, it is AI generated, but have a transcript come across the screen, you can find the More button at the bottom of your screen with 3 dots. And you'll find transcripts there. Welcome so much, Wyatt. Gaviniskis. My name's Jade Beryl. I'm the Director of Learning at the Outdoor Learning Store, and we're here for the fall Outdoor Learning series. I'm going to share my screen and kick things off so we can dive in. We've got a jam-packed roster for you today, so we're gonna go right in. It is October 22nd, and we are talking climate connections, outdoor learning, and climate change education, and it's very, very exciting. I'm joining you from Sinixt territory, the people of the Bull Trout. I'm up in a place in the Inselching language called Skihikan, where the ridgelines meet the water, and took this photograph today of a leaf in change, and we just voted. It was the first time I could vote in this country, and that was a change for me. And there's all this seasonal change happening, and we're going to be talking about climate change. And I know that the only constant is change, but I think for my acknowledgement, I just wanted to say that I'm seeing a change in the school systems. I'm seeing a change in the media and the things I'm reading and seeing, where Indigenous ways of knowing and being are being centered or uplifted and celebrated more than when I first moved to this country 8 years ago. So that change for me is welcome, and that's what I'll celebrate in this moment. Okay, as we slide on through, you know that we have our fantastic 4 seasons of Indigenous learning coming up. If you want to share in the chat where the traditional territory you're joining from, please do. But if you would like to listen to some fantastic and diverse Indigenous speakers share their perspective on truth and reconciliation, you can sign up and join us for this course. We also have a bunch of other professional learning, from short online courses to self-paced over a year. If you're looking to be supported, in addition to the things you'll hear about today, please have a look at the link that's going in the chat. I've got the fantastic Rachel with me today.
Hi, everyone. My name's Rachel. I'm the Education Outreach Coordinator at Take Me Outside. And on behalf of our organization and the other 30+ outdoor learning partners, we're super excited to be here this evening. I'm joining you from Treaty 1 territory, the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Innuit, and Dakota, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Manitoba is also the traditional land of the Inishwaak and Dene. And so I just wanted to give you a little note about Take Me Outside. This week is Take Me Outside week, with tomorrow be Take Me Outside Day, an entire day to celebrate outdoor learning. So all this week we've had amazing, fun educational activities. The schedule is live on our website. You can register there. You can find all the links to join. This is a free week of virtual field trips, prizes, and just engaging around topics of outdoor learning. So we'd love to see you there if you are interested in joining.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Always lovely to hear. Have you co-hosted with me here? Okay, really quickly, we're going to just do a very quick poll. I'm going to launch them. There's 2 questions in there. First one is asking kind of, who are you? Are you early childhood? Great teachers? Maybe you're more than one. Unfortunately, it doesn't let you select. But feel free to find the one that most represents you. And if you don't see yourself represented in that list, there are limited options. Throw us a little message in the chat. If you're not familiar, the chat is at the bottom as well. There's also a reactions button you can find, because unfortunately, I mean, there's over 300 of you here. But we're getting so many people. A couple of people found those love hearts. It is a little bit like presenting into the void. So anytime you hear something you like or you want to share, feel free to use those reaction buttons so those speakers know that you're here with us. And if you are having any tech questions or problems, you can dive in. People are asking about a certificate. Yes, you will get a follow-up email with a recording, linked to the certificate of participation. All the resources spoken about, featured, shared in this, whether it's me or the presenter speaking, you will find it in that follow-up email. So check your spam. Thank you for everyone sharing in the chat. Okay, I'm just going to give you 5 more seconds. 4, I know not everyone's in there. I'm so sorry. We're going to keep going because we want to get to those delicious meat and potatoes. If you're a vegetarian, maybe like lentil meatloaf and potatoes. Okay, 3, 2, 1. I'm ending that poll. I'm sharing those results. Okay, And this is what I love. If you're seeing the same bars as I am, we've got such a diversity of people joining us. It fills my heart with joy. Each and every one of you is welcome, wherever you are in your education journey. And we're so glad that you're here with us, because this work is our heart and soul work. And we're really, really grateful you're here joining. These are a bunch of partners, right? International partners, Canadian partners, more Canadian partners, friends from below the 56 parallel. If you're looking for resources or support, you'll find them somewhere on our website. There's a link in the chat. If you need funding or resources or tools, you'll find us. But here we are here to talk about climate change education. And the two key folks that we've got who have also brought in some amazing other voices to share in this space are Dr. Hilary Inwood, who is a teacher, educator, researcher, who coordinates the Sustainability and Climate Action Network at ACCE in the University of Toronto. You can see that full bio there. I'm just going to let things roll so that we can dive into the good stuff. And Maria Van Vallis is an experienced public school educator and a professor, facilitator of professional learning. She's doing a PhD, and it's very exciting to have you here to share your expertise and all of the beautiful things. So I'm going to stop my share screen. I'm going to load up the next PowerPoint and say thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much, Jade, for that introduction. We're all so thrilled. I think I can speak for the group to say that we're also thrilled to be with you tonight. And even though we are speaking into the void, I can certainly feel the energy and getting those hearts, knowing that you're out there. I think what's so incredible, feeling so many teachers in this space, is that commitment to climate education happening, and it's happening at a very, very critical time. So tonight, we want to help you gain some insights into how to continue to bring climate education to the forefront of what you're doing in your classroom. So I wanted to just start off with the next slide, just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we'll be doing tonight. We want to share briefly about some principles for climate change education that all of the incredible teachers we have with us tonight are going to be speaking to. And we're going to be addressing climate emotions. I'll be speaking about that. Then we're going to have three fantastic teachers sharing practices that they've engaged learners in classrooms, and how we work towards climate justice. And Hilary Inwood will be speaking about that and sharing some resources and some next steps in your learning. So moving to the slide on principles of climate change education, just want to give you 4 kind of key areas. And as you're listening to the presentations tonight, I think you will hear the teachers focusing in on whether all of these areas or some of these areas. And this comes out of research from Kristen Hargis and Marcia McKenzie. And it's about focusing when we're engaging in climate education, we really want to be attentive and think about these 4 spheres: the holistic, the social emotional aspects. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about that in a moment, because we know that what is happening in the environment, what students are experiencing, they could be living through wildfires, droughts, hurricanes, or even reading and learning and seeing what's happening, is obviously causing various levels of distress and significant emotions. So we need to teach and be attentive to these emotions. We want to ensure that the work that we're doing supports climate action, so that we're not just learning about climate change, but we're learning about it through the lens of how to take action and supporting student agency in the process. We want to make sure that the way in which we're teaching climate change is accurate, that it is grounded in the evidence, but that it's also critical that we're inviting students to be critically thoughtful and thinking critically about climate change, and also thinking critically about the root causes. And I'll share a little bit more about my own research involving youth activists, climate activists in Canada, and teachers across Canada. And the youth stated very clearly that their own mental health distress was supported when they were engaged in climate action that addressed root causes. And so we want to make sure that we're supporting students to be in that transformative mode of responding to climate change. And of course, The local and tangible. So looking for ways that students can become involved in their community, in the particular place that they live, connecting to land, place, people, to the natural world, to issues that are happening so that it's relevant and that the actions they're taking, they can actually see that impact in their own communities. So these are some of the principles that can help us address climate change robustly in our classrooms. And again, our teachers tonight are going to be touching on these aspects. Moving to the next slide, I want to share some critical research about the rising levels of climate anxiety. So if we could go next, thank you. There are 3 critical studies I want to highlight for you. You may be familiar with some of them. And if you're not, I want to draw your attention not only to some key findings from these studies, but also if you are someone who needs to convince others of why this is important in your educational context, these studies can provide some evidence. In 2021, there was a global study that looked at 10,000 youth across 10 different countries, and 4 in 10 young people actually reported fearing having children due to the climate crisis. They also reported in that study that they felt a moral injury. So they were affected by seeing the impacts of climate change, but also adult inaction was having a significant impact on them. There was a study done in 2023 with Canadian youth where we saw the majority of youth experiencing some fairly significant levels of anxiety, but also distress, to the point that at least 40% of young people reported that it was impacting their day-to-day lives. In my own research with youth activists, I got some real insight into the level of distress that young people are feeling. And what's very important here is that despite these feelings, the majority still felt that collaboratively, we can still take action and do something. But only half believe that they could contribute. And I want to draw that finding out because this is where our role as educators becomes so important in how we're supporting young people to feel that they can contribute and take action in response to climate change. And just this past week, another groundbreaking study was done with US youth that again showed some significant levels of distress. So we're seeing increased evidence about this. The most significant cause of the distress is they feel that there is not leadership that's taking action on climate. This study also found that education has a significant role to play in responding to that distress. So this was really the heart of my own research, which came down to these questions of how do we teach about climate change and nurture youth well-being? How do we actually engage with the realities of the climate crisis and nurture a sense of meaning, purpose, and hope? As part of that work, moving to the next slide, I collaborated with the Climate Psychology Alliance of North America's subcommittee, and we created this resource that we're going to include in the resource list about some of the ways that we can teach that can address these climate emotions. And I just want to highlight 4 of these 10 key points. First of all, it is important to recognize climate emotions. As teachers, we want to keep things positive, but what we've also heard from young people is that they know that this is happening and they appreciate when teachers actually engage them in the reality and give them space and normalize what it is that they're feeling. It is normal that they are feeling anxious, that they're feeling sad, that they're feeling distress about what's happening. So recognizing these emotions, and there's some fantastic resources that are highlighted that can help you with this, including a climate emotions wheel that's just been developed. It's very important as well to discuss climate through an equity lens. We need to look at this through the lens of the root causes of colonization, of the economic systems that are contributing to this crisis, and the ways in which reimagining our communities can be an opportunity to create more just and regenerative futures. So we need to ensure that we're talking about that people are not impacted equitably by environmental issues, by environmental racism, by the histories of colonization, and open up these conversations with students. Respectfully and non-appropriately highlighting Indigenous perspectives. These distinct worldviews focus on relationality, on interconnectedness, on loving and reciprocal relationships to land, to ecological webs. So highlighting these and coming back to that wisdom, that knowing, restoring relationships, restoring our love of the earth and all of creation, thinking about that relational consciousness that we have as young children and really nurturing that, making sure that we are respectfully bringing Indigenous perspectives and highlighting these perspectives. And finally, empowering youth to take action. This is what is so critical. This is what is actually going to help us work through our climate emotions. I can share with you that I've experienced being engaged in this work for over 20 years. Of course, I felt tremendous grief and despair and distress. And it is by collaborating with others and working towards change and taking action that I'm able to creatively work with those climate emotions. And young people are the same. They want to feel agentic. They want to feel that they can contribute. And so these are really, really important dimensions. I'm going to turn it over to Hilary now to introduce our teachers who'll be sharing with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you for all the work that you do. It's always a pleasure to work alongside you and to learn from you. I've learned so much from these three educators as well. So I am thrilled to be able to bring them into the conversation today. Both Maria and I feel strongly that one of the best ways that we can help other educators learn about climate change education is to really amplify the voices of those doing the work in classrooms and in outdoor education centers. So I'm going to introduce you to Pam Miller, Cam Douglas, and Cynthia Rolston tonight. They're each going to share a little bit about their practices. And I'm going to introduce each one as they come up, so we're not bombarding you with biographies right up the beginning. So I'll introduce you to Pam Miller to begin. Pam Miller has recently retired from the Toronto District School Board in Toronto, Ontario, as the instructional leader of ecological literacy, where she supported educators and youth in creating and educating for a just and sustainable world. She has over 30 years of teaching experience in environmental and outdoor education and has won many awards for her work. As part of her retirement, I'm putting that into air quotes, she's currently pursuing a master's degree in climate change education at York University here in Toronto. Pam.
Great, thank you. Yes, my friends say retirement. You're going back to school? Such a pleasure to be here. And yes, I have been an outdoor educator for about 15 years, and then I went into climate change education. I was also in the classroom. Whoops, Hilary, I think we advanced before we need to. There we go. So I'll bring you some of the thoughts from my lived experience. I'm going to start out with actually a beautiful garden at Don Mills Collegiate, where students are involved in Haudenosaunee Mound Gardens, gardening. There's even a winery, starting winery there. A must in every high school, I think. But really, outdoor learning, I'm going to use as a broad term for any active facilitated approaches that predominantly uses activities and experiences in the outdoors, which lead to learning, of course, health and well-being. We know that from being outside, and environmental awareness. And I'm taking this term from the Institute of Outdoor Learning in the UK. When exploring how outdoor learning could best support students, the book that I have on the far right, editors Jucker and Von Awe, argued that we want to be able to both understand the world we live in and to be in the position to interact with and change it in ways which are meaningful, just, and sustainable. And so from his book, and there's lots more there, lots more contributions, I'm going to focus on two areas that I think fit really well with climate change education. The first is about fostering relationships. And as Maria mentioned, our present capitalist society and the commodification of everything is working to alienate us away from a healthy relationship with nature. And so we need to unlearn that we are separate from nature and see things from a kinship worldview. And outdoor learning that is able to connect us with our hands, our senses, our whole body, gives us the best chance of building those personal relationships and empathy for all living things. The second highlighted is real-world learning. And to make changes in complex systems, we first need to understand the systems that we're a part of and how everything is connected, how energy flows, matter cycles, life webs. And learning in the real world that is constantly changing and dynamic gives us a chance to almost have a living lab to understand these systems and how we might work with them and leverage them to make the changes that need to be done. Of course, there's many other benefits for outdoor learning as outlined in this book and other publications, but I really just want to focus on those two. So the next slide, please. I want to start with really, basics. And as you're aware, solar energy warms the earth, causes wind and weather, and sustains plant and animal life. And any conversation about climate change involves the sun. And so getting our early learners started thinking about what is the sun and how the sun's energy is part of their daily lives is a great place to start, especially when you've got, kids, early years to grade 3. And so I like to start with an overarching question in mind, what cycles are we a part of? And with that, the students can explore the sun through shadows, tracing themselves, tracing one another or other objects, and then from the same location, but later in the day, trace a new shadow. I like the idea of using different colors over time so they can see the changes. And then they can also explore how solar energy, as it's changing, also affects microclimates. So getting them to look for the hot spots and the cold spots and the shady spots. And then understanding how that impacts all the things that are in the schoolyard is important. I got these resources from David Suzuki's Connecting with Nature, grades 1 to 3, and also from Lawrence Hall Science, those of you who remember it, the Outdoor Biology Instructional Strategies. You can find a sensory and terrestrial high-low hunt that's amazing. And I've also included David Bouchard's book there because you can also look at the sun from cultural spaces. And so his book is lovely. It really connects the medicine wheel teachings to the sun and how we connect the sun on a visceral, embodied way. 2 other books are also really helpful and an easy way to start with young learners. Next slide, please. So for older learners, having them explore the urban heat islands is a great place to have them collect data, take a look at how where we live impacts how we live. And as you know, direct sunlight can heat surfaces differently. And so in places of high asphalt areas or where water isn't allowed to permeate through the ground, you don't get a lot of vegetation. And so we have these, what they call urban heat islands. And 80% of Canadians live in cities or built up areas. And so it's not difficult to find the impact of this sunlight hitting these surfaces in different ways. Also, what ends up happening is that urban heat islands can be exaggerated or exacerbated by tall buildings, narrow streets where you get these sort of canyons. And then, of course, if you're right by a highway or factories or even air conditioners that are pumping out heat, that can make it worse. So students can measure surface temperatures in the schoolyard. And then there's a really neat citizen science program under GLOBE, which is sponsored by NASA. And they're looking at urban heat islands because satellite data doesn't get the granulation that your students will. And so by adding this data is an important climate action that they can look at. Of course, mitigate with greening and gardening and taking care of the existing vegetation is important. But we have had high schools in Toronto take a look at heat data and health data to pinpoint where community members are most at risk and look at the impact of no trees or the building structures or these canyons. And then there's a climate generation webinar that I just watched with Sarah Slack. And she talks about how she engages students to, again, identify neighborhoods at risk. So she connects with other schools and looks at the GLOBE data, and then they present the data to decision makers. And I think that's such an amazing way that they can advocate for climate justice. Next, please. Related to solar energy and so important in helping absorb carbon dioxide, of course, are trees and forests. And here again, we want to give importance to our tree nations. pedagogically centering trees as the teacher allows us to take a step back. And so I like this idea, like, what advice would the trees in our neighborhood give to us? How would they teach us better ways of connecting with each other and living with each other? And of course, Suzanne Simard's research about how the mycelium, build networks is so exciting. I really like the activities that Joseph Cornell has written up in Sharing Nature with Children. Meet a tree, as you know, is when you have a blindfold and you have a partner and they lead you to a tree and you have to figure it out. And then build a tree is when students are in a role and they play on either the phloem or the xylem or the roots or the sapwood, and they learn how the system of the tree works and how each part is in relationship with the other parts. Now, some of these activities may be more difficult if you have one tree on your schoolyard. It's kind of hard to, meet one tree, but it's still worthwhile to explore trees using different senses and exploring the value of trees from a more of a heart level. So again, in our climate action, we had a school named Bowmore Road that went the extra step. They learned about trees, they met all the trees, they mapped the trees, and then they also put QR codes and they put the Ojibwe names or the Anishinaabeg names on the QR codes so that you could also learn more about the tree from a different perspective. And they had elders working with them to help them understand the different connections for trees. And then my last slide, again, expanding that to older learners, is looking at the role of urban forests and how do trees shape our communities. Now, in the United States, you have redlining historical practices where trees weren't necessarily planted. It's the same here in Toronto. It's just not as talked about, let's say. But if you take a look at our maps of our cities, you're going to see patterns. And that's the best part, that students can play with that data. So first I had them exploring trees from different perspectives. So you have a group that might be, the human artist, or it might be the squirrel, or it might be the lichen, or it might be the urban forester. And they explore the neighborhood trees from these lenses. They take photos, they make ArcGIS story maps, and then they can add more field data over time, the species, the shapes, the climate sequestrant abilities of these trees. A really cool activity for some of our students has been to get involved with experts. We have a group called LEAF. They offer a tree tenders course, and we have our high school majors, specialties, taking these certification courses to learn how to maintain the tree health and recognize hazardous trees. And that brings sort of a level of efficacy to their work. Of course, moving into climate justice, again, overlapping city maps where the traffic related particles are heavy compared to the tree canopy, compared to the heat islands, is such a powerful exercise. Learning about that, but then advocating, how can we change this? What can we do differently? So I hope that gives you sort of two lenses, how outdoor learning, either through engaging in the hands-on sensory work that the outdoors offers, winter, summer, spring, fall, or connecting with the real systems that are happening so students get a better sense of the relationships and systems that we're a part of so they can start changing those systems. All right, Hilary, over to you.
Thank you so much, Pam. And I have to say that happens, that learning from trees happens at all ages. I'm taking my graduate students out tomorrow morning to have some conversations with trees. They don't know that yet, but that'll be a good part of their learning too. So I'd like to introduce you to our second educator for tonight, and that's Cam Douglas. Climate education has been at the center of mind and teaching for Cam for the past 20 years. Cam is based in Peterborough, Ontario, and he's a secondary teacher in the Kawartha Pines Ridge District School Board. In 2018, Cam founded the Youth Leadership and Sustainability Program to provide students with immersive experience in addressing climate and other ecological crises. Tonight, he'll share a few strategies that he uses in this program to directly engage his students in climate education. Welcome, Cam. Oh, and Cam, just put your microphone on.
It's been a while since our COVID times. I've kind of forgotten how to do this. Thanks for that. Thanks for that introduction, and thanks Hilary and Maria for actually pulling the session together tonight, and especially Maria for that really thoughtful framework that helps us pull these complicated pieces together. Pam, you set a kind of a beautiful lens that we can look through this through. I love the way you integrated the theoretical framework with some really practical and accessible tools that we can, without too much work, bring into our world. I also wanted just to acknowledge that I'm pretty thrilled about sharing this platform with 400 other similar-minded educators who are trying to bring climate education into our classrooms and into our students' worlds. As Hilary noted in my introduction, climate action has actually been a personal focus for myself, but especially in my teaching for the last 20 years. I reached a point about 10 years ago where I was feeling like I couldn't do enough in my 75-minute geography or resource management class to dig deep enough into the issues and action, and especially struggled to get my students outside in the confines, I guess, of field trips and where they're missing classes as we go out for the day. So I imagined a different model of education, and with a little bit of work, I created the Youth Leadership and Sustainability class. And I'm going to just take a moment here to, I don't like to read screens, but I just wanted just to set the stage here. The goal of the program in the top right is to provide experiences, opportunities, and support for students to develop the understanding, the skills, and the relationships that will allow them to play leadership roles in protecting our planet and their communities. So you'll note in the bullets that it's a full-time 1 semester 4-credit integrated curriculum program. There's grade 11 and 12 students, mostly grade 11. We're in Peterborough, but we're actually partnered with Trent University, and our main classroom is on campus. We've got a very active field program that takes us out regularly out into the territory of the Mississauga First Nations. So the focus in the class on the climate is really to understand the science, the politics, and the social elements of the crisis. Moving on to, of course, the wide range of solutions and innovation and so on, and then to allow students to develop skills and the tools and the confidence and ultimately the opportunity to take action. And you're going to see some of that in my slides here. So we use a climate justice lens throughout our work. And as we are able, as settler teachers, we reach out to integrate Indigenous perspectives into our work. And already, I mean, this is learning for us, for sure, ongoing, but already seeing some rich rewards for doing that work. Next slide, please. I'm going to speak to 2 strategies that have really brought our learning to life in the YLS program. And the first is that of embracing community partnerships. And Pam, you touched on this in your talk about relationships. But we've worked with about 20 community partners over the past 7 years. And the idea there, these are senior students, senior high school students. It allows them to see best practices being played out in the different realms of the climate action world. In a community context, and it also builds a strong sense of place when they're actually out. We go out into the field to visit these community partners, and then as senior students, it also helps them imagine and build career pathways to move on to this work, to take it that level of engagement and action to the next level. Perhaps most importantly, it just gets them outside and takes them into the community. And I think I should note too, from a practical perspective, for teachers who are wanting to do more, but maybe just a little bit anxious about getting it right, and maybe I don't know so much exactly about food or the climate science, working with community partners decenters us as teachers. We can step back and just sort of play the crowd control and then let the experts do the teaching. The experts love to integrate with our classrooms. It's in many of their mandates to work with you. So I think it really works well for both sides. So in this particular slide, you see that's Sam up in the top right corner. We're up in the Cachacoma Forest, which is just north of Peterborough, and we regularly visit this forest, but we worked with the Cachacoma Forest Stewardship Committee. And originally, we were actually documenting the forest. We later learned that the forest was about to be logged, and the yellow mark above his tape measure was actually an indication that this hemlock tree was about to be to cut. Our work led to the realization that this is in fact the largest old-growth eastern hemlock forest in the country. And there we're now faced with this challenge. It's about to be logged. So our forest metrics project quickly turned into an advocacy project. We linked in with another community partner, that's the Wilderness Committee, learned some advocacy skills, and then immediately connected with politicians and some of the government folks working in this to try and move that force. We actually have the committee has secured a moratorium on cutting that we're working with right now. Next slide. So just, I'm going to quickly run through these just to give you a sense of some of the partnerships that might work. Obviously, food has a huge impact on our climate footprints. And as part of that, we were working with a local organization, Nourish, supporting food security. And in this project, the students actually created 100-kilometer meals that they did themselves in groups and then presented them at this forum here for their parents and all our community partners. Top right, we're working with the Autonomy Conservation Authority. We work with them each year and really looking at rewilding some of the spaces around our community to try and bring back some of that biodiversity. And as many of you would understand, the very strong connection between biodiversity and climate. In this particular case, we're putting in a rain garden at the local campground just down the road. The bottom left brings a smile to my face today because this was my day today. This is last year's picture, but I spent the day with my class out working with the city of Peterborough. The students were out exploring the different cycling networks, cycling infrastructure possibilities in our city, everything from protected bike lanes to no bike lanes to separate trails, and better understanding ultimately, how are we going to get people out of cars and onto their bikes? Because it's not just going to happen because we care about the climate. We have to get it right. So we looked at intersections, all the little nuances, I guess, of designing this. But perhaps most importantly, I want you to look at their faces. They love this trip. And I think there's something visceral about getting out. Climate action sometimes is actually action. We're actually moving, we're doing stuff. And I think they love the fact that they, that feeling of wind in the hair. And I had a few of them saying, I need to get out back on my bike more. And I will just note that my second point is talking about the relevance of timely lessons. Those of you in Ontario might appreciate that our Premier Doug Ford has just passing legislation to prevent bike lanes from causing congestion on streets. So we've been talking about that in class, and we're looking at that context today. In the bottom right, we were working with Jeff Beaver in his outdoor classroom down at the Alderville First Nation, and Jeff was a really rich lesson looking at the cultural and ecological significance of Minoman, or as we might know as wild rice, in their culture. This was a real highlight. So we roasted the rice, and then he's dancing the rice. We got to dance the rice afterwards, and then we winnow it, and ultimately we made some food with that. Next slide, please. It's so important for me to have my students' hands in the soil. And we're so fortunate our classroom is only about 200 meters from the Trent University Vegetable Garden. So we're regulars up there, making that connection to growing food. And then we had lunch last week at the Seasoned Spoon Cafe, which is the farm to table sort of reality up at Trent University. On the top right, again, smiling, the visceral action. This really was action. We're actually removing buckthorn and other invasives at the Peterborough Zoo. This was just a couple of weeks ago. I love the partnership we have with the Reframe Film Festival over the years. They featured one of our documentaries. They featured some of our students' videos. And each year, my culminating activity in the leadership course is for the students to actually take in the festival, watch these fantastic films, and they are invited to actually introduce films, so it builds a bit of confidence for them on their feet in front of a crowd. The picture bottom right, this was last week up at the Haliburton Water Festival, where my students become teachers for the day with grade 4 to 6 students. And what a beautiful opportunity for them to really put action. It really brings the action in because they're now on the spot. They're leading the students on various aspects of water, from watersheds to habitats and so on. And it helps them build confidence and understand the importance of environmental education. Next slide. So the second issue I wanted to talk to you about is that of connecting to current and local initiatives. And I think we all know and appreciate that, kids, they want to know that the learning that they're doing is relevant and connecting in real ways to the world they live in. So the start of each semester, I kind of take stock what's playing out in the sort of the larger ecological canvas in our community of Peterborough and region, and provincially, nationally, internationally, and then trying to find some entry points for the class to engage. So this particular image here, this was our project last year, where we reimagine our city, what it would look like in the middle of we're updating our climate action plan in Peterborough, and we then instead of sort of going to council and urging them to do more and being angry young people, and all of which is completely justified, we instead took it, we went out 20 years, imagined the city that could emerge if we actually did what we need to do. And these images then and videos are being shared with the city councillors as we close this process out, and these were all hung up in the school board office to remind our educational leaders of the importance of climate action. Next slide. I just want to just close out here with a couple of leadership activities where we're connecting. And this is Nico up in the top left. He and 8 other students in the class that year were advocating at City Hall for the city to declare a climate emergency. They did, in fact, do that, and they gave credit to the urgency in the students' voices, some of whom were in tears during their presentation to City Council. They credited the young people for moving that dial. That's Tanner at the bottom left, leading a local climate rally, building some confidence in front of crowds. That's a Fridays for the Future in Peterborough. And then finally, on the right, we had the opportunity, COP15 Biodiversity Conference came to Montreal. The class put in a proposal to present. We were accepted. We went to Montreal, and this is the class presenting about 2 worlds, the one they feared, one that they knew was possible if we actually adopt the 22 targets. And finally, down at the bottom right, that's Sam in City Council Hall presenting to the mayor and councillors saying we need to localize these biodiversity targets to make sense here. And then from there, we went out into the local schools. The students had developed lessons in biodiversity that they delivered to try and bring that relevance into classrooms. So it's another beautiful community partnership when younger students work with, or older students work with younger students. So those are 2 strategies that I think have worked really well in my teaching practice to try kind of bring things to life. And next slide. If you want to know more about the program, the website's there. You can reach out to me through that website. All of this information will be coming out to you. The field program is highlighted in our Instagram account. We made a 17-minute documentary about the program, and there's a bit of video explanation of how the program works in another documentary entry. So I appreciate your attention. I hope some of this might work for you in your classroom. And I do want to acknowledge that, of course, this is easier for me in an integrated curriculum where I have the students all day, but I think many of these ideas can be teased out into regular classrooms.
Thank you so much, Cam. And where were you as a teacher when I was going through secondary school? That's what I want to know, because I would have loved to have had you as a teacher. I'm hoping that some of the teachers who are listening in tonight are like, maybe I could be like Cam Douglas, and I think that'd be fantastic. You might also want to be like Cynthia Rolston, though, and Cynthia's our 3rd educator for tonight, and certainly not, might be last, but certainly not least. Cynthia's been a junior intermediate educator in Toronto, Ontario for 24 years. As a science generalist, she considers herself a specialist in integrating environmental education into the curriculum through science, technology, engineering, art, and math, commonly known as STEAM, and inquiry-based learning. She also presents a yearly workshop with Ontario educators on breaking barriers in STEAM education. Cynthia, we're so pleased to have you here tonight. Thanks for joining us.
Yay, thank you so much. And thank you for the introduction. I'm going to start things off right away with a controversial statement, depending on who you're talking to. And that is, all education is inextricably linked to social justice. And right now, it honestly feels like we're living in a world where that isn't always safe to say or acknowledge. So I'm so grateful to know amazing educators like Hilary and Maria and my fellow panelists, and so inspired by and appreciative of the work that they do, not just as educators, but as allies, and for allowing me to take up some space and tell you a bit about my experience. Because, to be honest, past experiences have really made me kind of leery of many environmental and outdoor education organizations and terminology, as I found that often they've turned out to be performative gestures towards treatment of relationship with the land and wildlife, but not humans. Designed predominantly by white educators, where examples of the work were mostly led by affluent schools. So to back up a bit, I was born and raised in rural Ontario and completed one of my undergraduate degree in British Columbia. And through sport, I've had a chance to travel a fair amount of the country. And I've been teaching for 24 years with strengths in STEAM and environmental education, all of it in Toronto, and our most diverse city. And yet my lived experience matches what the data shows us of a system that is predominantly white and has changed very little in my time as an elementary, secondary, and post-secondary student, as well as an educator, and having experienced anti-Black racism at each of those levels. So when it comes to outdoor and environmental education, I haven't seen myself represented or particularly welcome in many of those spaces. So my why, and we can actually go to the next slide, my why for becoming an educator from the time I was in grade 5 was really rooted in 2 reasons. One was to be the representation for other girls of color that I didn't have. And secondly, to create a safe and inclusive environment for all students with identities that fit outside of dominant culture. And I just knew from a young age, or at least strongly believed from a young age, that if we cared about humanity equally, we would care more about the land and how we leave it for others. And it's really been at the heart of my teaching since the beginning. So up until this year, I had spent the last 14 years teaching in a school that was predominantly Black, Muslim, with university educated immigrant families living at or below the poverty line. It was also a community surrounded by social housing dedicated to families escaping domestic violence and families looking after family members with mental illness. And through relationship building and listening to my students and their families, I was able to help transform the outdoor knowledge and experiences they already had and provided opportunities for them to share it and showcase it for their community. And this work wasn't performative, but based on genuine care, and had been a part of my pedagogy long before terms like climate emotions or climate justice education, although I believe that's exactly what it is or was. And so I'm excited to share a little bit of that with you. In this picture, my students went for a walk in their local ravine 4 times over the year. We took photos using iPads. You did some citizen science with iNaturalist. And in the end, students created a trail guide of this local trail. And in the beginning, many of the students were initially afraid to go into the park and thought of it as a scary space. And then by the end, they were sharing stories of biking adventures they had after school and on the weekends, and were telling me about the wildlife that they recognized. And I could see that the way that they treated each other and their schoolyard really became outwardly one of care and concern. And I found that often when educators talk about climate change education and outdoor education, at times it can focus on the doom and gloom of what's happening to the land and the wildlife. And I think part of that is because educators feel more comfortable focusing on the destruction of the land as opposed to the dehumanization of the people that are currently most impacted by its destruction. And so sometimes I wish that we would, like, how can we talk about justice for the land, but not talk about justice for people? When we talk about decolonizing education, we know that those currently in power are benefiting from the colonial structures that are in place and really trying to instill fear in us as educators from really doing this work. And each year, I ask my principal for the census information that families fill out every year. And I do this to ensure that all voices in our community are present in our learning and that students see themselves represented in positive ways that empower them to take up space, particularly where they aren't usually seen. And incorporating voices that may not be present in your classroom is also important so that students are planning for a world that includes everyone, whether it benefits them or not. I frequently reflect on how comfortable would a brand new student of a different racial background, disability, or gender identity feel if they were to join my class tomorrow. Obviously, we know that families have the strongest influence on how those students will be treated, but given that we spend more time with them during the waking hours of the day, our influence is not negligible. Representation matters. I believe seeing humanity in others is inextricably linked to developing more respect for leaving the environment in a way that will benefit all life for generations to come. Next slide. One of the best ways to be an active ally is to form genuine relationships within your community. I've worked in several different communities over my 24 years and seen many colleagues have a hierarchy of how they treat people within the community. I've had and continue to have my own uncomfortable journey of identifying my biases and using that understanding to improve my relationships within my community. As I mentioned, the school I was at for 14 years was predominantly Muslim. I am not Muslim. And 5 years ago, I fasted for the first time during Ramadan and have every year since. And in the beginning, I did it because I just wanted to have a better idea or understanding of how the students felt. And then by the end, the community connection was so much stronger, as well as the insight that I gained from that intentional period of reflection. Oh, sorry, I lost my spot. Let's go to the next slide. Ubuntu is an ancient African word meaning humanity to others. It's often described as reminding us, I am what I am because of who we all are. A person's value as a human being depends on acting for the sake of community and promoting community interests before individual interests. And right now, I feel like the world needs more Ubuntu. In the pictures that are here, one is of a grade 1 student recognizing the invasive species dog strangling vine and helping to remove it from our school's nature area. And then beside it is the same student in grade 8, still caring and sharing her knowledge and helping to improve the quality of our school grounds. And then beside it is a picture of, a part of a picture of an architectural model that my students created, imagining their sustainable community. There was a vacant plot of land walking distance from the school, and students were asked to become urban planners, architects, and engineers to create a design of what they would build on this plot of land. And almost all of the students recognized food insecurity as an issue in their community. So they made that the focal point of their design and used the space to create a halal food bank, farmers market, greenhouse plots for community gardening, a small industrial farm, and a local restaurant where both would provide training and work experience for the community. It also included a space for local artists and art installations, an outdoor space for recreation and exercise, recognizing the benefits that would have on positive mental and physical health. And at the very, very start on the first slide, there was actually a picture of my students presenting their ideas to their principal and superintendent. And students also wrote local politicians about their land use proposal. And we were actually geared to attend a city council meeting. And this literally happened right when the pandemic hit. So unfortunately, they didn't have that opportunity. But what was very impactful was that students whose identities are not frequently seen in STEM professions saw themselves in these roles, and they felt more empowered and motivated to consider a career in the future. They also felt positive and optimistic about the possibilities for their community and had a stronger sense of pride in looking at ways they could make a difference. Students who traditionally didn't feel seen, understood, or cared about in the education system had a different perspective completing this project. Climate justice education needs to center around seeing and acknowledging people's humanity and tapping into the perspectives and ingenuity of the voices outside of dominant culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Wow, I've been following the comments in the chat, and there have been so many compliments flying for the three of you, and rightfully so. The work that you do is truly extraordinary in the public school systems here in Ontario. And I know that there are educators across the country and in other countries doing similarly impressive work, but we're so pleased to be able to really showcase your work tonight. So thank you, the three of you, for joining us. I will say that the three of you are already demonstrating ways to get into educating for climate action and justice. This is a new guideline that's being put forward by the NAAEE, the North American Association for Environmental Education, which is a very active organization and group in the States. If you're not a member already, you might want to consider becoming a member. And they've just this year put out their guidelines for excellence on educating for climate action and justice. If you look at what their key principles are here, not only do they align with the work of SEPN that Maria introduced us to early on in this webinar, but they also have, our three educators have absolutely been demonstrating different ways, very practical ways to enact these principles in classrooms. You probably have heard, though, a couple of times from our educators and from Maria and now myself as well, that really what we want you to do is think not about climate change education, but we want you to think about climate justice education. We've been really inspired by the work of Kwok and Casey. We have the link to their article towards climate justice lessons from girls' education in the resources that we'll share with you at the end of today's session, where they really are advocating for a new way of thinking about education, not one that simply replicates the root causes of the climate crisis. That's the education today in gray. And you can see that the continuum here sort of deepens, gets to a deeper shade of green over time, moving from conformative and reformative models to transformative ones that move from doing things better to doing better things, but ultimately to doing things differently. We can't keep replicating the same old approaches in education and expect to get a different output, because it's not happening. So please consider, and if you haven't taken a screen snap of this this model yet, please do, or look up Kwok and Casey's model, which is a little different from this one. We've been developing it a little bit more based on theirs, but we encourage you to think about climate justice education and how you can enact this in your classroom. And we hope that we've given you some models for that tonight. We're going to send you the links to all of these wonderful resources. You can't teach people what they need to know in a 45-minute webinar, but some of these guides, and if you read all of them, you'll certainly get closer to the work, whether you're looking at the work from climate generation in the US to notions of Indigenous land-based learning, the work of Indigenous climate action. They have some fantastic publications for educators. I can't speak highly enough about them. Even our friends at Learning for a Sustainable Future have a wonderful set of guides about empowering learners in a warming world, which takes an inquiry-based approach to this work. So look for those links in the resources that we'll share with you. And finally, Maria and myself are engaged very much in the Accelerating Climate Change Education in Teacher Education project, and we have lots of ways for you to get involved in that. We offer free webinars throughout the year, both for K-12 teachers as well as for teacher educators, because we believe this work needs to be done in every single level of education, in both pre-service and in-service teacher education. And right now, actually tomorrow night, Maria is beginning to co-facilitate along with Lauren Williams, a National Climate Change Education e-course for Canadian educators. I've put the link in down there for you and the QR code, and we'll include the link in the resource handouts as well. Because if you sign up for this course for the winter term, it does start tomorrow and that it is full. But if you get yourself on the wait list in the next week, you'll be the first ones offered spots in the winter version of this course instead. So we really encourage you, if this interests, to join. And again, that's for Canadian educators K-8 educators who might like to join us for that course. So with that, we'll just say thank you so much to our partners at the Outdoor Learning School and Store for their work and for allowing us some space today to bring some of these ideas forward. Thank you so much. And actually, you can take that off. We're supposed to see that one, Jade. There you go. In this case, thank you so much to our educators again, and thanks for giving us some space today to introduce these ideas.
Thank you. I'm overwhelmed in the best way possible, as I feel like the chat was full of and the information coming in. And sorry, when slides were happening, it's because Hilary and I were I was trying to fight for supremacy while I was trying to type to you and do all the things. So apologies if there was tech things, that was entirely on me. What incredible presentations, so inspiring. And as someone who like studied climate science and was like maybe 6 or 7 years ago on that left-hand side of that scale, like teaching about climate science and thinking that was the thing, and like having like kids be like gripping the table, and the work that you've done and the work that you cited like has changed the way that I talk about this, the way I educate about this, the way I feel about it. And so personally have been very, very inspired by the work that you're doing. And for those of you maybe who are here who are like, I don't know, you know, I feel like you've given so many practical ways of doing this. And it's also okay to say, like, if you were doing it one way, you can learn anytime, right? To move into these new ways of sharing and learning together with that justice at the center. I'm incredibly
just a shout out
inspired.
to Sarah Urquhart, who's just shared the link for the e-course in the chat for anybody who's interested. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sarah. And we will, in your follow-up email, there's a link to a resource page and everything will be on there with clickable links that you can dive into, link to the recordings if you want to go back and focus on some of your favorite slides or look at things again. But what an all-encompassing, incredible amount of information. Thank you so much. Such important work. I'm so grateful that you're all here. Okay, we're right on the dot. You were so efficient with so much information. I'm very, very impressed. There was just like a couple of questions, and I'll just ask one before we go to prizes. So if you're hanging around, there will be 4 prizes given away. So please feel free. I'm just looking at my other screen here while I find it. Okay, they're saying, somebody asks, are the resources that you shared, for example, on those different like action toolkits and things, are they free? Are they free for educators to access?
They are free, yeah. So that's why I've included them.
Which
I
is
can give a
brilliant.
shout out that the Outdoor Learning Store is also selling climate change education resources, but I don't think those ones are free.
No, and that's it. That's the balance. We try and give you these amazing free professional learning opportunities, but if you are a paper copy, kind of having something to work from, there is that list of resources there that help you dive in. But this work shouldn't be behind a paywall. So please engage with the resources in that list. There'll be plenty of free ones that you can get connected to. And just people, I think you gave so much information, they were just completely absorbing, because someone asked a question and then you answered it in the next slide and then they rescinded it. So it's like this. I think something that's often missing is, you know, that high school age and younger ages. Is your course, does it talk to all different age ranges for educators teaching different grades?
I'm going to ask Maria, she's one of the co-facilitators of the course, to answer that.
Yeah, so in this session, we really are focused on K-8, and we're just determining in the new year whether we will extend that. We haven't made that decision yet, but it is more K-8 focus.
Brilliant. And if you're looking for some high school inspiration, maybe you can touch back in with the work that Cam's been doing and look at some of those things that were demonstrated. Again, the recording is available, so you can dive back in when you if you're looking for inspiration later on. I'm just going to say thank you to each and every one of you, Cynthia, Maria, Pam, Hilary, Cam. You know, been reading your work for ages. Perhaps the teachers not so much, and now I'm deeply excited, and I will be inviting you to come to Banff for our outdoor learning conference, just letting you know in advance. You'll be getting an email about that. But thank you so much for all the work you're doing and for communicating it so incredibly excitingly and with energy this evening or afternoon, wherever you are. So thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. Hilary, Maria, for bringing this whole thing together, for being this wealth and sort of island of knowledge that you are now providing boats for us to come and connect with. It's just lovely. I feel really, really, really honoured to have learned with you in this space too. Okay, stick around, everyone. I'm just going to do a really quick prize giving. Our presenters, if you would like to go about, I totally get it. For those of you who are still here attending, I'm going to do a random selection. I've got 2 $25 gift cards to the Outdoor Learning Store for Gospava Barak. You are our first winner. We will email you, we'll find you. You don't have to do anything at all. We'll get in touch with you tomorrow. Okay, my second winner for the Outdoor Learning School and Store is Michelle Paraganen. Michelle Paraganen, we will be reaching out to you. Okay, and 2 gift cards to the Take Me Outside store. We can get some really beautiful made in Canada, lovely t-shirts and things. Okay, Emily Eaton, you're our third winner. And our fourth and final winner is Sarah Haney. Sarah Haney, you are our fourth and final winner. It's been an absolute pleasure spending this time with you. We will be back next week learning about future makers and sustainability resources in your classroom. So please come and join us for that next one. Wishing you all a really safe and wonderful evening. Take care.